It is the dead of winter, 20,000 years ago. The sun went down hours ago, and the temperature is still falling. Outside, the cold is sharp enough to kill an unprotected person before sunrise. And you? You have no heated house, no coat bought from any store, no fridge, no matches, none of the things you'd recognize as survival gear. By every instinct you have about the modern world, you should not live to see the morning. And yet, you're warm, you're fed, and tomorrow you'll wake up and do it all again. So here's a question that should be almost impossible to answer. How did a soft, slow, hairless ape, an animal with no fur, no claws, a body that overheats in summer and freezes in winter, survive the single coldest chapter this planet has seen in 100,000 years? Not for one brutal winter, for 10,000 of them. The answer is a story of 5 inventions, and the last one, the smallest one, might be the only reason your family line exists at all. So let's figure out how they did it. Now, you might assume they survived because they were just tougher than us, hardier, a little more animal. They weren't. Strip away the dirt and the furs, and they were us. The same body, the same brain, the same fragile tolerance for cold that you have right now. They didn't beat winter with their bodies, they beat it with their minds. And it started with fire. Fire seems obvious. You're cold, you make a fire. So, try it. Right now, with no lighter and no matches. Just rocks. Because that is all they had. The only fire-starting method we have hard proof of from the Ice Age is brutal. You strike a lump of iron pyrite against a sharp edge of flint, over and over and over, throwing a shower of tiny sparks into a nest of bone-dry tinder. And you pray one of them catches before your fingers stop working. It is hard. And this is genuinely ancient. At Wonderwerk Cave in South Africa, there's evidence of humans using fire as far back as 1 million years ago. Neanderthals were striking pyrite on flint 400,000 years ago, before our species had even fully arrived. And because making fire was this hard, it reshaped their entire world. If a single spark is this precious, you never let it die. Fire became the most valuable thing a group owned. They guarded their flint and pyrite like treasure. When they moved camp, they carried the fire with them, cradling a glowing ember across miles of frozen ground, the way you'd carry something alive. They stockpiled dry fuel inside their shelters so no blizzard could ever leave them in the dark. And out on the treeless tundra, where wood barely existed, they burned bone and fat pulled from the very animals they ate. Fire kept them warm in one spot, but it also chained them to it, because you cannot stray far from the only heat for miles, unless you can carry that warmth on your body. And that is invention number 2. When you picture an Ice Age human, you probably picture a single scruffy fur slung over one shoulder. Forget that. And here's something most people never think about. We don't actually know for certain when humans first started wearing clothes, because animal skins rot. They almost never survive in the ground. So how do you possibly date the birth of clothing? You follow the lice. In 2011, a team at the University of Florida did something genuinely brilliant. They sequenced the DNA of body-lice, the kind that live only in clothing, and traced back to the exact moment those lice split off from ordinary head lice. Because body lice simply cannot exist until there are clothes for them to live in. Their answer? Humans first started wearing clothes around 170,000 years ago. Clothing may literally be part of how we survived walking out of Africa. But draping a hide over your shoulders is not the same as beating an ice age. The real revolution was making clothing that sealed to the body, and that took one of the most underrated inventions in all of human history: the eye of a needle. Just a tiny sliver of bone with a single hole bored through one end so you could pull a thread and sew skins into shapes that actually fit. The oldest eyed needles we've ever found are around 40,000 years old, from Denisova Cave in Siberia. With them, people built layered systems, 3, sometimes 4 layers deep. A soft inner layer to wick away sweat. Insulating middle layers to trap warm air. A tough, wind-blocking outer shell, a parka-fitted trousers. Not a costume, engineering. And clothing that truly sealed to the body was so warm that for the first time, people could leave the fire behind, walk out into the open cold for hours, hunt, scout, travel, and come home alive. The fire warmed one spot. The needle let them own the entire frozen world. So remember that needle. We are coming back to it. Fire, clothes, and still, at night, in a storm, you need walls. But here was the problem. Across the open tundra of Ice Age Europe, there was almost no wood, no forest to cut. So they looked at the single largest creature on the landscape, the woolly mammoth, and they built their homes out of it. Picture standing inside one. A dome, framed entirely from mammoth-bone, heavy skulls anchoring the base, curved ribs and giant tusks arching overhead into a roof, hides stretched tight across the frame, the floor dug down into the earth so the cold can't creep in, and a fire glowing in the center, the whole space warm enough to peel off a layer. This is not a fantasy. We found them. At a site called Mezhyrich in Ukraine, archaeologists uncovered 4 of these huts, built from around 150 mammoth bones, the largest roughly 18,000 years old, raised during the single coldest snap of the entire Ice Age. And these were no one-night shelters. Some show signs of being used and rebuilt for centuries, one for as long as 400 years. Families coming home, generation after generation, to the very same warm dome of bone. And do you know how we found the first one? In 1965, a farmer in Ukraine was digging out his cellar, and his shovel struck a mammoth's jaw. Beneath his house was a home built 15,000 years before it. Warm fire, warm clothes, warm house, and one thing that still kills you even when you're perfectly toasty: running out of food. When the herds move on and the ground turns to iron, where does your next meal come from? And their answer is almost funny in how clever it is. They turned the Ice Age itself into a refrigerator. After a big kill, far more meat than they could eat at once, they'd weigh it down and sink it into a freezing pond, where the icy water held off rot far longer than open air ever could. A walk-in freezer, no electricity required. And saving food for the lean times is ancient, older than our species. At Qesem Cave in Israel, researchers led by Ruth Blasco, Ran Barkai, and Avi Gopher discovered that 400,000 years ago, humans were storing deer leg bones like cans, leaving the dry skin and the marrow sealed up inside for up to 9 weeks before cracking them open for the fat within. Because that was the real prize. Not the lean meat, the fat. In a frozen world, fat was survival itself, the most concentrated energy you can eat, the fuel that keeps a body burning hot through the night, and the very oil that fed their lamps and fires. Out there, fat was gold. So now you've got the full kit: fire, tailored clothing, a house of bone, a hidden store of food. That is how humans survived winter. But I've left something out. Because tens of thousands of years earlier, when our species first pushed up into the frozen heart of Ice Age Europe, we were not alone. Someone was already there. The Neanderthals, And here is what's wild. When it came to the cold, their bodies were better than ours. They were built for it. Shorter, stockier, broad barrel chests, thick, powerful limbs. A shape that holds on to heat far better than our tall, lanky, tropical build. By every rule of biology, the Neanderthals should have won the Ice Age. They were the locals, the cold-adapted ones. They had been thriving in that frozen world for 200,000 years before we ever showed up. And yet, they vanished. Every Neanderthal on Earth, gone, around 40,000 years ago. And we, the fragile newcomers, practically built for a warm climate. We stayed. So how did the humans who were worse at the cold survive it, while the ones who were built for it disappeared? This is the part that genuinely gave me chills. Because one of the leading answers comes right back to that tiny object I told you to remember. The needle. An anthropologist named Ian Gilligan at the Australian National University has spent his entire career on this exact question, and his argument is striking. When you look at the sites where our ancestors lived, you find needles and awls and the full toolkit for sewing fitted, tailored, layered clothing. But when you look at Neanderthal sites, those sewing needles are almost entirely missing. The evidence suggests Neanderthals wore simpler clothing, capes, hides draped loosely over the body. Warm, yes, but not sealed, not fitted. And in an ice age punctuated by sudden, violent cold snaps, Gilligan argues, that one gap becomes the line between surviving and not. Tailored clothing wasn't just cozier. It let our ancestors travel farther from shelter, hunt longer in worse weather, and hold ground in cold, open country that the Neanderthals, for all their raw strength, simply could not once the temperature dropped far enough. The stronger, tougher, cold-adapted humans may have lost to a better coat. Now, I want to be honest with you here because it matters. This is a hypothesis, not a closed case. Other scientists argue the Neanderthals could make perfectly good clothing, and that many things, disease, small numbers, competition with us, drove their end. The debate is real, but sit with the possibility anyway, because it is genuinely possible that brute strength lost to a sewing needle. That the reason your bloodline made it through the Ice Age, the reason you are here, warm, breathing, watching this right now, isn't that your ancestors were the strongest ones in the valley. It's that they were the ones clever enough to thread a needle. So the next time winter comes and you complain about the cold while you zip up your coat, stop just for a second and feel what that coat actually is. It is the latest draft of a 40,000-year-old idea. You didn't earn your warmth tonight. You inherited it. From a hand that guarded an ember through a blizzard. From a hand that stitched a coat by firelight. From a hand that stacked the bones of a giant into a home. We never beat the cold with strength. We beat it with fire, with thread, and with each other. And every single one of us alive today is the descendant of the ones who figured it out. They didn't have much, but they had warmth they built with their own hands, food they saved for a colder day, and a circle of people who simply would not let each other freeze. And honestly, that is still the whole game. If you felt something just now, that little pull of curiosity, then you are exactly the kind of person this channel is for. So do me a quick favor, hit subscribe, and come wonder with me again. Until then, next time you zip up your coat, thank a 40,000-year-old needle.